Hello and welcome to Real Talk for our community with the Impact Movement. And I'm Jimmy McGee. Seems like it's been just a little while since we were together, since we met for a special edition last Friday. And just want to say welcome again. Tonight, we're going to be talking to our partners. So how do we do ministry to Black students virtually online? So as we start this evening, all right, hold on. I'm trying to get my watch party started. Okay, I got it up and running. So I just want to tell you a little bit about our format tonight. After I introduce our guests, I want you to either chime in on the Impact Movement Facebook page or to YouTube. Now, our guests, they are starting watch parties, so they may start watch parties on their Facebook pages, but we won't be able to see your questions, and we want you to interact with our guests tonight. But after this, as you begin to introduce your questions, I'll pose these questions to our panelists. So again, go to the Impact Facebook page or go to YouTube. And then both of them is being posted live simultaneously. All right, so let me introduce our guest tonight. I'm really, really excited about these folks. Shaylen Hardy, you know, it seems like I've known her for ages. She is the National Director for Black Campus Ministry for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. She lives in, well, right now, I think she's somewhere in Western Kalamazoo, Michigan. But she just sold her house in Lansing, and she's hoping to relocate to a new home with her husband, Malcolm. So she's on with us today. And then I got Bebe Hobson. Bebe Hobson, it seems like I've known him forever as well. He's married to Tasha, and he lives in Tampa. I don't even know if he was born in Tampa, but he's been there for years. And he is the first director of global diversity for Wyldlife. And he has been in that role at least for the last 5 years or so. And so I'm excited to have both Wyldlife and InterVarsity with us. So I'm going to let our guests give some opening statements and just thoughts to share before we move straight ahead. Go ahead, Shaylen.
Well, I just want to start off by saying that my life was profoundly shaped by campus ministry. I grew up in the Black church, raised in a missionary Baptist church, and was one of those kids who were at every single thing that the church had to offer. It really gave me a solid foundation of my faith. But it was really in campus ministry that my faith became my own. And so I have a heart and a passion for reaching college students, Black college students specifically, because there's so many gaps and just a lack of access. And my heart and passion is just about ministering to Black college students. We have had more challenges because of COVID-19, but we still need to do this essential work.
Excellent. All right. And BB, you can give us an opening statement as well.
Yeah.
Talk about your life and Wyldlife.
Yeah. Bebe Hobson with Wyldlife. I've been on staff now for 28 years, but before that, I was a product of Wyldlife. Unfortunately, my father passed away when I was 10, and I met Wyldlife when I was 12. And like Shayla, I grew up in the Baptist church, Southern Baptist, missionary Baptist, in the sense of I knew when to raise my hand, I knew when to walk, I knew when to stand, I knew when to sit. But I did not know what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think what was the impact of Wyldlife for me was simply it was a relational ministry. Like even my Wyldlife leader, who was a white male, no matter how we treated him or what we did, Jim Dyson would always still show up. So it was something about showing up that they instilled in me, where I didn't find my church showing up. My church would be there if I showed up, but Wyldlife showed up to my football games, track meets, all the things I was involved in. And so it really impacted me. And so what Wyldlife did to me, that's what I committed my life to doing for others.
Wow. You know, I got a lot in common with both of you. Growing up in Chicago, I didn't know anything about parachurch organizations. They weren't in my neighborhood. I don't think I heard of a Wyldlife. I remember briefly Navigators because there was a Black navigator in Chicago and he had a relationship with our Black church. But other than that, I had no idea of Wyldlife, Youth for Christ, InterVarsity, Crew, Impact. These names were not familiar in my world, but my Black church was. And the first church I joined was Grove Pikes Baptist Church on the southeast side of Chicago. And it made a significant impact on me because I can still remember not only being baptized in that church, but going up before the whole church for membership. And so I tapped that experience, and then I just like both of you, I just exploded once I got to a college age because I was away from the church, and it gave me a chance to see how real my faith was apart from that environment. Now, so let me just say a couple of things about you guys. I think InterVarsity and Young Life, I think your years are the same. InterVarsity started in 1941. When did Young Life start?
That's it. Yeah, depending on when you're counting officially. Yep.
So both of y'all organizations are roughly the same age. Impact started in 2002. Our parent organization, Crew, started in 1951. The NAV started in 1931. So when you think about these organizations, and they were essentially mostly white staff serving white students, how do you think about your role now to serve Black students or people of color? Is that important to you, and how do you nuance it when you got such a rich history of an organization that is so familiar with working with white students? And in the case of Young Life, suburban students. I'll let you lead this time, Bebe. What's your thoughts with this?
Yeah, I think the thing is I've been around Young Life for a long, and I've learned the good, the bad, and the ugly about this ministry. But I also know that Young Life has a great brand in the sense of raising funds and things that I need to get our communities equipped with. We have 27, 28 fabulous properties that I know I would not have access to if I was not a part of the Young Life Ministries. I've also raised money for college tours and taking mission trips and things that we would not have been able to do. I tell people all the time, I can leave tomorrow and start Bebe Hobson's ministry, and I can promise you those checks would not follow me. You know what I mean? They trust me, but those checks are written out to Young Life. And so, and we have people now, we have a president and people who really care about the city and the kids that we work with. They just don't know how. And so we're allowed to hire people who, indigenous leaders who have relationships with folks, whether that's Latino, African-American, Asian, whoever, and allow them to work within their own culture. So now that hadn't always been the case. So, I mean, Young Life used to be a cookie cutter ministry. In other words, so the way you did it in suburban Young Life is the way you did it in the city and, in all those places. That's not no longer the case anymore. We've grown a lot in that sense of meeting kids where they are, whether that's on the basketball court, dance studio, now it's the video games, whatever the case may be. We have the freedom to shape the ministry in the way we see fit to do that.
All right. What about you, Shaylen? Talk about the challenges of trying to reach Black students.
Yeah, I think historically we've done really good work in InterVarsity. But as Bebe said, in some ways it was kind of a one size fits all model. And then you're thinking about the context that many students are coming from, that model doesn't fit them. So essentially what we were asking people, we were saying, in order for you to get Jesus, be comfortable with how we present him to you. And if you're not able to, then you should go find him somewhere else. The problem with a ministry to Black students, outside of Black churches, there weren't many places available on college campuses. If you think about the college campus, because of injustice, systemic inequality, there isn't a lot of Black churches lining college campuses. And so essentially for Black students, if you wanted to have a place that felt safe or that communicated the gospel in your heart language, you had to find a way to get 10, 15, 20 minutes into town, into the neighborhoods where the Black churches was. And so one of the ways that I've been very grateful for InterVarsity's approach of contextualized ministry. We're saying some Black students will fit in a multi-ethnic, diverse context. We have spaces for them. But there are some students who are very, very high identity, who have low assimilation. They haven't yet, they're not as comfortable in mixed spaces yet. We're saying, how do we actually present the gospel in a way that speaks to their experience and is contextual for them, that they can say, that makes sense to me. And so I've really appreciated that we've had an approach that we contextualize the ministry for different communities. So it's a both and. If you're low identity, high identity, we're trying to reduce as many barriers as possible to the gospel for college students.
So, I've been doing campus ministry for a long time now. And I remember in some of my days when I was a campus staff explaining to our organization how we're trying to do ministry with Black students, I almost felt like a sense of embarrassment because our Black students had different needs from the other population. And different doesn't mean less than, it doesn't mean better than, it just means different. So can you guys isolate or at least give me a couple of different ways that you think you're trying to do ministry to reach Black students that you knew the organization didn't possess prior to, because of they didn't have the cultural competency to do the work that you guys are doing? So give me a couple examples of how you're trying to do ministry to Black students, or in your case, BB, to special populations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Black, and you have, I think, Latino, you got Young Lives and Capernaum. And let's start with Shaylen. Shaylen, go ahead.
So I think one way would just be the importance of community. So I think in some ways, like, community is really big in campus ministry in general, but I think sometimes we try to lead with mission, or we try to lead with, we're going to go out and we're going to evangelize and we're going to do this. Where Black students on predominantly white institutions specifically, they're looking for community. They're looking for safe space. They're looking for, who are my people, because I'm separated from the people who were my community, where I got my encouragement from. So we focus a lot on building a sense of community, and as they belong, they're open to believing. Instead of saying, do you say yes to all these different things? If you can't, then this might not be the place for you. And so I think that one of the major differences for us is that we really we work hard at building strong community that support students as they're asking questions about the faith. I think that this is a way that we also might differ a little bit from some Black church communities, is that we welcome questions. And so I think that there's some ways in which Black students come in being encouraged to believe what has been told to them. And so they have all these questions, but they feel like they're invalid. And so I think that we want to create a safe space for them to feel like they belong, but also to name some of the things they've been wrestling with.
Okay. What about you, BB?
Yeah, I would totally agree. Here's the thing that I always said to Young Life as I navigated myself around this. I use the term reasonable accommodations. The government came out, can't remember what year, but it was the American Disabilities Act. And they said that every building had to be retrofitted so everyone comfortable, whether it was a wheelchair, special needs, could get and have same access to all that. And so that's the same term I use to Young Life. So some of those was, we had to provide vans. Like, our kids did not have their own cars. And so a reasonable accommodation is that we would provide transportation to get those students to our Young Life clubs, pick them up, drop them off. Realize that not what our suburban ministry does, but it was something that was not you can't do, we had to in most cases. The second thing was we provided meals. We knew that reasonable accommodations, if we're going to have our kids right after school, that a part of our budget every year was providing food for our kids. Now, some of us got smart and we didn't have to use our budget, but we would make connections to the Black church saying, hey, don't you have the senior mission and the junior mission? Can they feed us this night? Or the usher board or the choir, this kind of stuff. And so we began to do that, and also bringing in the community to help provide some of that reasonable accommodation, which was food, and also tie the community back in to Young Life. And so I would say, even in our Capernaum ministry and in our ministry to our teen moms, which is Young Lives, we had to figure out what was reasonable accommodations. Because again, we can become a social organization and then we're buying Pampers, we're doing all these things that someone else should be doing. So it's a real balance between finding out what those reasonable accommodations are, and we'll still figure that out.
Well, and Jimmy,
go ahead, Shaylen. Go ahead.
Can I also add that another thing that came to mind is just like the wrestling with what's actually happening around us. So I think it's somewhat different than our counterparts. Black students feel what's happening day to day around them. And so if our ministry can't address what they're experiencing, they're not interested in it. And it doesn't speak to a real and relevant faith. So I am hopeful that we are encouraging all of our ministries to look around at what's happening around them in the world, in the environment, and speaking to and talking about what the gospel has to say about those. But in Black communities, if you're not talking about that, you are irrelevant. And so I think that that's one of the ways that we start with some of the difficult conversations probably sooner than some of our counterparts in broader multi-ethnic spaces.
See, and the things that you guys are saying is complementary to us in the impact movement. We feel the same way. The value for community is high for us. The value to talk about real issues where our students are wrestling with, all very important. And then to look at the differences, what we try to say, we create an alternative space for our students to come and meet Jesus. And alternative space is a welcoming spot where they don't have to worry about being ridiculed for the way they interact with each other culturally, or the different things that they need versus the broader community. I want to reiterate a point before I move to a harder discussion. The whole value of the Black church. All of us, we talked about the Black church and how we got introduced to our faith and maybe anchored and maybe introduced to some concepts there. Can you explain right now, how do you maintain a value for the Black church in your ministries at Young Life and InterVarsity? So this time, let me start with you, Bebe.
Yeah, it's simple for me in the sense of we remind kids all the time we are not the church. Young Life, for lack of a better word, tagline is we introduce kids to Jesus Christ and help them grow in their faith. And so our job is to introduce kids to Christ through evangelism, but get them plugged into a solid church that is going to help them grow and disciple them and do that kind of stuff. And so the value is we make sure our staff are involved in a church. And most of the time, the kids will follow them, our students will follow them to that church. But we also help the church to realize that evangelism and outreach is important for them. The problem sometimes is the kids that we work with, middle school, high school kids, if I'm really honest, Jamie, they don't pay tithes. And so what we end up saying to them is, but their parents do. So if you get the kids and the kids are interested, then usually their parents come, and that changes the dynamics of the church. So.
Okay. All right, Shaylen?
Can you restate the question again?
Yeah, so can you explain how valuable the Black church is to your work in BCM and InterVarsity right now?
Yeah, I would say I think the Black church is invaluable. I think that in some ways they're complementary. Some of the things that I learned in InterVarsity, I was like, wow, inductively studying the Bible. As I was learning about different disciplines, I felt like my spiritual life was awakened and went to another level. I think that sometimes it's a temptation to throw away or to look down on your experiences before, like, oh, I'm so much further along now than I used to be, not knowing that those two things work in relationships. And so I think that for a lot of our students, the foundation of their spirituality comes from the Black church community. And so what we're hoping to do is to build upon that, to help them re-enter back into that church community while they're in college and then when they leave. And so our hope is that we're developing college students who are deeper in their faith and their understanding of mission, so they can go back and continue to contribute while they're in school, but also when they graduate. And so I think that in my mind, they can't be disconnected. BCM, Black Campus Ministries, separated from the Black church does not work. And I think that there are gifts that BCM, InterVarsity, parachurch organizations, I think there are significant gifts that we have to offer the Black church community. But also, I think the Black church community has significant gifts that all of our parachurch organizations need. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do better, and one of the things that we're working on, is like, how do we operate with more mutuality, where we're partnering more, where we're learning from one another and taking our best practices to make what we both do better.
See, that's exactly what we talk about in Impact, everything you just said. I mean, we know in general, millennials and Gen Zs are hemorrhaging fast in the white church. I don't think they're hemorrhaging as quickly in the Black church, but they are leaving. And our deepest desire is to build a relationship with the Black church so that we can prepare that church to receive millennials and Gen Zs while they're in school. But even after college, they can see that as a destination for them. And the goal is, can we build a partnership where we'll take some of our skills and train some of the parishioners or the pastors to come and do work on campus, but then also preparing them to receive them. I mean, our deepest dream is to see our students as leaders of today's Black churches. That's our hope.
That's great.
Let me take a brief moment and remind everybody that we're asking you for questions. And so if you can go to the Impact Movement live or the YouTube live channel for the Impact Movement, you can ask questions. And then we have technicians who will post these questions to us so we can speak, ask these panelists those important questions and get their input. So I want to transition now to something difficult. And I'm going to ask y'all a question first that's personal, and then I want to see what does that do to change your ministries. So Ahmaud Arbery was killed in late February. I read about it. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Shaylen's in Michigan, and Bebe's in Florida. But recently, last week, the video was finally released where people actually saw how he was murdered. And now it's an uproar around the country. Last Friday was his birthday, so everyone went out, or many people went out to run or walk 2.28 miles. I think that's what it was. My question to you guys is, first, when you heard about the death, I want to know personally, what did that do for you first? And let me start with you, Shaylen. When you became aware of what happened, because in these last 5 years, we've had a sea of deaths. How did this make you feel first when you heard this, Shaylen?
Yeah, I think I would just say like a deep, deep sadness, rage, anger, and then some like a bit of coldness. Like, like it happened again. It's unsurprising that it happened again.
Probably. Uh-oh. We got to turn your volume on.
There's just a sense that it seems that we will never be free from this sort of trauma. And then, of course, I see my husband, I see my brothers, I see people that I love who could easily be in that place. And lastly, I'll just say, I live in Michigan. I live in the capital city, and to see all of the protests that have been happening around like people's freedoms being impinged on because they've been asked to shelter in place for 2 months. So the reality of this is the view of America that people are like, I don't have liberty because I haven't been able to leave and shop as much as I want to. And this is the America that my people are experiencing. That really, really hit home for me. And I just got to another level of frustration with in some ways, like white privilege and like white evangelicalism, because I saw a lot of the people who were on the forefront of those movements were self-proclaimed Christians. And so I think that it was an example of we live in very, very different Americas, and a sadness and a rage that's connected to that.
How'd you feel about it, Bebe? Hearing about his death or seeing the video?
Yeah, I got to tell you this whole story because I wanted to make sure it makes sense. About 12 years ago, I decided I wanted to build a house. All right. And so me and my wife always said we grew up in a predominantly African-American community. And so we brought land to build that house, paid the land off, got ready to build a house. And no one, and I did not ask the right questions, but no banks would approve me to build a house because of the value of the homes in the neighborhood in the community that we grew up. So our dream of being a home builder, so we ended up going outside of our community, no longer building, ended up buying a house in a predominantly white community. There was one other black pharmacist who lives one street over. And so that's how we ended up, because I wanted to say how I ended up in the neighborhood. I'm here for about a year, and I was diagnosed with lupus, and so I try to exercise for my health. I'm walking one evening through my own neighborhood. I get home, probably walk 3 or 4 miles, get home, and I'm in the shower, and my wife knocks on the door, and she says, "Bebe, the cops are here." And I said, "The cops?" She said, "I don't know what they want. They won't tell me." And so they came. I went outside to say, "Hey, the cops, can we talk to you outside?" And they said, "Hey, we just had some folks calling saying that you were prowling through the neighborhood." And they were pretty concerned because they didn't know a black person lived here. And so I answer all the questions. And I'm just telling you, dude, I have never felt so frustrated, angry. It didn't matter what my title was. It didn't matter what school I went to. It didn't matter that I was an associate pastor at the local church. At that point, I felt the lowest I've ever felt. And then I had to justify. First of all, they came to my address to get me, the house that I walked to, not some other neighborhood. And so I said all that to say, anytime this happens, I'm reminded of that situation that I think I'm over, but I'm really not over it. And so it brings up those memories of going, that could have easily been me in that situation where they didn't call the cops, but they just said I was an intruder in that neighborhood, shot me, arrested me, pulled me around, again, because it's me and one other person that lives here. And so it really does hit home a lot anytime those situations come up, because again, son, friends of mine, but me being an African-American male, it really hits home. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, W.B. Du Bois talked about living in this double veil, this idea. But social media allows the world to see, no matter what stage you are, no matter low identity, high identity, cops and people like these people who allegedly killed. I say alleged because they've not been found guilty. But alleged, when they see us, they don't see high identity or low identity, they just see black.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it don't really matter who you feel, how you talk, it's how you look. And it's amazing to me that there's a bullseye on the melanin in our skin that allows people to feel like they can be volatile to us. And it breaks my heart. My neighborhood is gentrified now. I moved over here, partnering with Wyldlife and doing urban projects, and it's not the same neighborhood. So I tell my sons, I need you to walk under the street lights. I don't need you to go through dark spaces. I need you to run, because the people in this neighborhood no longer see you as a neighbor or child of the community. They see you as a threat. And so just like this dude just went on in broad daylight, a jog, our children's lives can be snatched from us so quickly. I want to pivot, as hopefully we're going to get some questions. Again, I want to remind you guys, if you have questions, go to Impact Movement Live or to YouTube. So now that Ahmaud Arbery's death is out and it's posterized so everyone can see it, how does this change your ministry? What does this do to you now to change or influence or inform? How do you do ministry to Black students? Go ahead, Shaylen.
Well, I think it just enforces like how we try to minister to students. Like, it can't just be a four worlds diagram. It can't just be about evangelistic outreaches. It's still a part of that, but we're also dealing with people who are consistently enduring trauma. And so what does it look like for us to minister to students who are experiencing trauma, but also our staff are experiencing trauma? There were times a couple of years ago when we were in the stream of Black people being killed by police, where it just felt hard to get out of the bed at all. And then you had to be responsible for leading people on campus, but those same students are experiencing the same thing. So we have to help them just on a mental health side of it, pursue the right resources, prayer ministry, those kind of things. And then there's also the ways in which like we have to help them see how the gospel can still be consistent to what they're experiencing. Where is Jesus in the midst of their suffering? What does he have to say about this? And, how to mourn, how to lament. And I think that that's one of the profound gifts of the Black church, the Black community, is being able to just lay out pain, frustration, mourning before the Lord. But I think that it's kind of become more and more, it is kind of becoming more of a lost art. So being able to say like your frustration, your pain, your anger is valid. And then also just in the same ways, taking them to scripture. I think the last thing I'll say is just like the identity piece. So the reason that we're shouting Black Lives Matter is because society and history hasn't shown us that they believe that that's true. But part of what we're also showing students is that they are actually created in the image of God, that their Blackness is not a curse, their Blackness is not an accident, but it's actually a part of the Imago Dei. And so there's some ways in which what they see on TV, what they see on news and interactions that they might have with police officers and things like that, it's an assault in their minds in some ways of, are they actually created good? And so part of our discipleship has to be, yeah, like your Blackness is good. You are created in the image of God. And how actually couldn't the Lord use how he's created you for his purposes? And so I think that there's some ways in which it becomes on the forefront that we can't hide and not talk about Blackness, because in our society, you aren't going to forget that you're Black.
Well, and how is this incident informing your ministry, Bebe?
Shaylen, first, let me say thank you. Amen, amen, amen to everything you just said. Ours is a little different because we deal with middle school and high school kids who really don't deal with reality. I mean, like, I can't tell you how many of our staff, because I don't work with them directly, have said they had to tell the kids the story about what happened. Like, they didn't see it on the news. They didn't hear about it. Their parents are not talking about it. And then, so once you introduce it, and then this is how this can and shall and will impact you. So it's not like the college students who are hungry and going through this. They're going through other trauma, but the trauma of what's happening. Most of our middle school and high school kids have the ability to compartmentalize, like, this is what's going on over here, but here's what's going on in my life. That doesn't even affect me. Why are you trying to make me sad? Why, you know what I mean? So we have to work through all of that own internal trauma first to get them to realize, no, this will impact you, it will always impact you. And like the things Shayla said, of just, how does God speak to me in the midst of all of this? You know what I mean? How does this, because again, I don't want to get off the subject, but most of our kids that we're dealing with is like, okay, I understand that was a bad thing to happen, but what does it got to do with my dad in jail? What does it got to do with my dad in prison? What does this got to do with we not eating at home? Like, these are the things that are in our face, the trauma that we're facing every night, every day. I'd love to be concerned about that, but right now I'm concerned about all of this, you know, my mom on drugs, all the other issues that we have in our communities. And so it's more of informing them, enlightening them, and then taking the steps that Shayla took.
You know, as I listen to you guys, I do have one more follow-up questions about this. But as I listen to both you, Shaylen and Bebe, all I can think about is Tom Skinner again, who talked about the need to have a cradle to grave ministry in the Black community. That, you know, all of these parachurch organizations were created for white people outside of church. Child Evangelism Fellowship, Young Life, Youth for Christ, and then if they got the college, InterVarsity, now we got Navigators. Young Life has a college ministry, and campus outreach and reform. And then folk don't get saved there. Then there's Full Gospel Businessman and Christian Businessman and Bible Study Fellowship. And if they don't get them all during that part of life, at the end of their days at Elder Hostile, there's a ministry to see if people can know Jesus. And yet my deepest desire is a cradle and grave ministry that we do have for our community, because we don't have the kind of resources that these organizations represent. So here's my second question I have for you guys in terms of Ahmaud Arbery's death. How are you facilitating this conversation within your organization to your peers? Is this something that, because your organization are primarily white institutions, how are they processing this? Are they having conversations? How are you engaging them in this? And Bebe, I'll let you go first this time.
Yeah, I think it's having honest conversations. I think every one of our, you know, it's the typical stereo. Every one of us have a meeting and someone to say, oh, how you doing today? And you go, well, I'm glad you asked. And then you begin to share the story and you say, though, and they go, oh, how can I help? It's like, okay, no longer be silent. And so I had this conversation with the president of Young Life on last Friday. And then this weekend, he put out on his Instagram post, a wonderful story about just how does this affecting folks, and if it's affecting folks that don't look like me in our ministry, it's also affecting us. And what I said to someone today is like, I can say that, but by him saying that as the white president of Young Life, I've had more comments or had people become aware and now searching for it than I would have. Because again, diversity and all those things are in the title of my job, so people expect me to say it. So it's having the conversations with people who are coworkers who say they love Young Life, they care about Young Life, but they're being silent. And I'm just saying to them all the time, you being silent is just like you not supporting or being against. So we need you to speak up in this instance if you care and love for me and you say that I'm your brother. And so it's the continually having the dialogue around every conversation that we have, whether it's at an area director meeting, a regional director meeting, a divisional, when folks ask the question, how are you doing? I'm glad you asked. And then you can share that story.
Okay. How are you doing it? Shaylen, how are you sharing, or is this issue being discussed within your world of InterVarsity?
Yeah, I think just to Bebe's point of in meetings as you have, as people ask how you're doing, as people name it themselves, just talking about like the tension, the weight that you experience as a Black person and that your staff are experiencing. I actually have been, quite honestly, I feel like I haven't been super proactive on this one, just because this was like one of those moments where I was like, I don't know if I have it in me to proactively push. So I've been actually really grateful for different colleagues within the movement. Our Asian American Ministries leadership team got together and had a time of prayer separate, and we didn't even know that they were praying for us. And they recorded a message and asked that I would share with our community. And it was just it meant a lot, some of the things that they named and some of the things that they were praying for us. And then also just ways in which different people in our departments are just seeking to care. Our diversity officer, vice president of diversity, talking to him a little bit about some of the trauma that I experienced. He checked in on me, asked how staff were doing, and he's been talking about what are some ways that we as a movement can care for our staff on an individual level. So I do think that there's ways in which I've been grateful to be able to name it, to bring it to the forefront. And I've also been grateful for the ways that people actually have been pursuing. How can we serve? How can we speak? What is our role as a movement to speak out against injustice, but also to care well for Black students, Black staff, and to pour resources into making that happen. So, like I said, it's one of the things that I wish I had a more emotional capacity to do, but I feel like it's one of the things that I feel like I didn't have it, and it actually just caused me to be stuck for a while because I think just the emotional weight. And I think that's one of the hard parts of being a leader, is that like you're dealing with the trauma, you're dealing with the pain, but there's also things that you have to do in the midst of it. And sometimes you can get yourself up to it and you can shine in that leadership moment. And sometimes, you fall a little short. So I think I try to use my platform and putting some things out on Facebook and talking more broadly to people in the movement. But I just really have been grateful for the internal resources that kind of rose up to the challenge within InterVarsity.
I think, go ahead, Bebe.
No, Jimmy, the only thing I was going to add, because you remind me, is that, I did get a lot of phone calls and they go like, well, what should I do? And I'm going like, just call and check up on your staff. You don't have to have elegant words, but just showing that you care, asking them how they're doing and listening is way more than not doing anything at all. And she just reminded me of that. So.
Yeah, I think what people fail to realize is the emotional toll of what we have in these spaces. I mean, the emotional toll of first processing this information internally, processing this information to our staff and then to the organization. And then we got other issues too in the age of COVID-19. It's not like we were looking for incidents like this to come in when we're looking at devastation of how this disease is ravaging through all of our communities across the country. So we're managing a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of anxiety. And then let's just bring up the classic thing we're dealing with, and that is fundraising. The whole issue of fundraising, right? This is not a great season for that. So I have a couple more questions I want to see and ask people again. If you're on our watch parties and you ask a question, we can't see it. So please go to the Impact Movement Live or YouTube Live and post your questions. But I got plenty of questions for them. I want to really bring up this fundraising aspect of our role. I wasn't going to do it. It was really far off. But since it entered my brain, I got two other questions. I got to ask this. So can you give people some of the challenges for Black people who desire to do ministry in our organizations, and what are some of the significant work that they need to do to be full-time in this space, and specifically fundraising? And at this time, it could be maybe some people will want to write a gift and give to some of our organizations. But really, speaking to the whole thing, we call that language, I think we do across the board, MPD. Is that right? Does everyone call it MPD?
We do.
Yeah. Do y'all call it MPD? What do y'all call it over there? Fundraising?
Yep.
All right.
Or taking donors serious.
Taking donors serious. So why don't we talk about what it's like for
Can you tell me what that stands for?
It's called Ministry Partnership Development. Did I get it right? Did I get it right?
Okay.
All right. We call it. So talk about the challenges of recruiting Black people to come and work in these spaces, and yet instead of getting paid, they've got to raise their salary. Tell them what that feels like. I'll start with you, Shaylen, and then go to Bebe.
Yeah. So, graduating from college, I worked hard to get my marketing degree. I had a couple of different job offers on the table. And when I prayed about it, like I had mentioned early on, my life was just completely transformed in my experience in campus ministry at Western Michigan. I saw how the Lord changed my life. I saw how he changed my friends' lives. I saw how he was actually changing the campus. And so then I realized that my experience was unique, that chapters like mine were very, very rare across the country. And so I was like, Lord, this is an injustice. You need to do something about this. And I felt like the Lord was like, okay, I got something for you. So he invited me to come on staff. And I really just had a sense that the Lord was saying, I want you to serve here and create communities and spaces like this for other Black students to encounter God on campus. And I was like, cool. And then my staff worker was like, oh, well, the way that you get paid is you ask people for money to support you. And then that's how you raise a budget. When you hit your numbers, you get your paycheck. And I was like, oh yeah, the Lord's not calling me to do this. So after some wrestling, I decided to say yes. And it was hard. It was so hard. They encourage you to create this list. You basically write down all the people that you know. And then you say like, who knows me? Who is a Christian? Who knows InterVarsity? And I had this list of people like, oh, I know they're going to give me money. I know this person going to give me money. And it was so hard. And I received so many no's. And not just a no, like, I'm not going to support you, but like, why don't you get a real job? And you went to college and got a degree so you can ask us for money. And, as I was in school, it was really starting to develop the ability to hear from the Lord. And I really strongly sensed that this was the Lord's invitation for me. But then once I got into the ministry partnership development and I wasn't doing much development, I was like, did I mishear the Lord? Like, am I actually called to be here? And then internally, I think our language has started to change now. But back in the day, it was like, well, if you are called, provision will follow. And so then I was like, as the money wasn't coming in, I was like, maybe I'm not called to do this. Like maybe the Lord. And the reason, quite honestly, that I'm still on staff with InterVarsity is because when I was new on staff, one of my colleagues in our like new staff training stood up for our regional training. And she was like, Shaylen does a phenomenal work. She is gifted and she is called, but she is not funded right now. And if we say that we really value diversity, we need people like Shaylen at the table. So we all need to support her. So most of the staff in the room became donors of mine. Wow. And that actually kept me on staff for a while. And then I had a friend on staff who was connected to more major networks. She actually did donor sharing. So we went to Virginia. She introduced me to some of her people and they started donating money to me. So like, if it was up to me and my networks and the people who said yes to me, I wouldn't be on staff anymore with InterVarsity. I actually probably would have left around year 3. And it's just been a struggle, even from like broader church support. I have gotten money from churches for like missions projects. So when I went to Bolivia, when I went to China, but as far as like sustaining regular support from churches, particularly Black churches, haven't received that. And so I know like for a lot of my white counterparts, that's what anchors their ministry. That's what keeps them supported. However, unfortunately, that hasn't been my experience.
Okay. What about you, Bebe?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, it's things she said, but how I articulated is that if you're going to come and work for an organization like this, you need to find you a champion who believes in you, who has connections. There was this old adage that says, don't give me a fish, teach me to fish. But there's another step. Don't give me a fish, teach me to fish, but give me access to the lake that I'm fishing in. You know what I mean? And so you got to find somebody who has you got to have somebody that has a key to the lake. Because they can teach you to fish all day, but if you don't have a pond to fish in, then you're not fishing. You know what I mean? And so that was the key. And so most of my career, I've always had someone who had access to the pond. And once they gave me access to the pond, I took advantage of that by asking that person to introduce me to someone else. And it was my Young Life leader. It was Jim Dyson. I remember the day I came on Young Life staff, he said to me, he said, I believe that you'll raise more money than I can ever raise, because the people that I talk to really don't want to have a relationship with me, but they want to have a relationship with you, whether it's guilt money or any other kind of money that they're trying to give, you know? And so he taught me that, and I began to understand that. And I realized, and I just tell you, it's not that I'm a great fundraiser, but I've been blessed by the Lord that he's taken my biggest fear and made it my biggest joy. You know, biggest joy. Real quick story. First week I'm on Young Life staff, and I know this is not for everybody, so I'm not saying this don't happen, but I'm saying about trusting in God. I meet with this major corporation, Eckerd Family Foundation. They used to own Eckerd drugstores. Probably most people on this call won't know what an Eckerd drugstore is, but it used to be big CV vets by now. I did not realize when I was a child, my grandmother was the maid for Jack Eckerd drugs. So I'm going to, before their foundation, they asked me where I live. They asked me what I name. They go, hey, do you know Mathan Lee Harris? And I go, yeah, that's my grandmother. They go, oh, you got to be kidding. She raised us. She cooked for us. Step outside. I never had to do a presentation. I came back in and they wrote me a $60,000 check. That was the first check I ever received for fundraising. And I think it was God's way of saying, are you going to trust me or not? Because Young Life and anybody else can give you all of these plans, and we do have to have a plan. You know, do this, do this, do this. But I'm telling you, man, it's the Holy Spirit, and it's God moving and us trusting him. Like Shayla said, that's going to keep us here over and over and over again. Because without him, I would not be here.
So, you know, what I want to do is paint this picture for our audience. So some of our audience are donors. Some of our audience are alumni. Some are current staff. Some are students. I need to paint a picture. Even some are members of our churches of what we're talking about here. We're talking about a group of people who graduate from college or they get mid-career and they want to go work for the Impact Movement, Young Life, or InterVarsity. And if they're Black and they want to do good work with their communities, what are some of the layers that inhibits, and psychologically, there's an emotional toll when you go through this. Yeah, because you're going through and said, I really want to do this, but I haven't got access to the lake. In fact, there's a sign that says, don't fish here, right? It's a private pond. Somebody else owns it. And you know they got fish, and you over here in the stream, ain't nothing over there but little tadpoles. And you try to figure out, and then you go through this psychological barrier, because I know in my earlier days, you get a $15 a month check. You get a $50 a month check. I remember the first church I presented to, they gave me an offering, raised an offering to me. And let me tell you like this, I needed both my hands to carry it out. It didn't have a lot of soft money that was light. It was a lot of heavy money in there, but they were serious. And so I'm in there separating quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies, because they raised an offering and they gave me the best of what they could. You're grateful for that because the scripture tells us to. But then you got this budget you're trying to raise because you feel like God really wants you to be there with Black people and help Black students. I know in Impact, you know, we're only 18 years old. We're just not we're not as old as you guys, but you know, our budget, we're just barely $1 million organization nationally. Whereas, you know, I can name in this campus ministry world, as high as 600, 120, 300, $400 million are being raised in these other organizations that are primarily white. And so that same toll that you talk about individually is a toll that I not only carry individually, I carry it for the whole organization. So it's a big toll of what we're trying to shift. Again, we're running out of time. It's about 15 minutes late before we're over. So if you got any questions, please post them. So I got a question for you guys. Now I want to get back to the Black students that you serve. Can you give me an idea in light of everything you just said, Bebe, when you talked about, you know, mom and daddy and all those issues that they have at home, and then you talk about there's a need for people to meet Black students on college campuses, Shaylen. What's your vision at the end of the day when you do get a Black student? What's your aspirations and hope happens to that Black student if they get involved in your ministries? Go ahead, Shaylen.
I mean, I think that part of it is like from the personal relationship with Jesus. I want them to grow in their depth, their knowledge, their understanding, their intimacy. But also I will hope that they would have a whole worldview of how Jesus fits into every part of their life, so that as they pursue their major in college, not only have they become a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, they're starting to think through how is the Lord inviting me to use what he's called me to for his glory. So it's not just to go get more money. It's not to have a certain amount of type of friends, but it's really like, how can every part of my life be to the glory of God? And so helping shift their worldview, helping them see their relationships, who they choose to date, who they choose to hang out with, that all is important, and that matters to God, and it matters to who you become. And I think that as believers, in our kind of gospel presentation, we talk about the fourth world, and that's where we talk about you, because of your relationship with Jesus, that causes you to go out and be his hands and feet in the world. And so I think sometimes as the church, we stop short. We say, once you and Jesus is good, you have your personal relation sewed up, you set, and then you can do everything you want with the rest of your life because it's your own. I really think that we actually need to be challenging our students. We need to be challenging people that, yes, we want you to have a relationship with Jesus, but that is the starting point of what he calls you to do and who he calls you to be in the world. And so my hope would be that our students are change agents in the world, that government looks different because they're there, that the classroom and the education system looks different because they're there. And so my dream would be that we change systems, but also that we are helping transform people. So people are also saying yes to Jesus because of the students that we graduate from our ministries.
Excellent, excellent. What's your vision for students that get involved in Young Life, Bebe?
Can I just say amen and be done?
Amen.
You want me to follow that? Yeah. I mean, but no, I mean, like, she hit a home run. Here's the deal. I think the thing with our students, Young Life, I said earlier, introduce kids to Christ, help them grow in their faith. But when it comes to the students that we work with, help them grow in their faith means something totally different than our suburban counterparts who have everything that they need in the sense of parents and all these type of things. And so what we've said is we take kids to camp in the past, and we've learned from this, kind of like Shaylen said, they get there at camp, they stand up and they say, I accept Jesus Christ as my personal savior. Then they come back home to this neighborhood and they're still getting arrested, they're still getting felonies, and they're still getting pregnant and not graduating high school. And so what we said, we got to do more than this. We're going to introduce kids to Christ, but we set goals like having them graduate from high school, having them graduate without a felony, and then having them graduate without being parents. Now, I'm telling you, if a kid loves Jesus, doesn't have a felony, doesn't have a baby, and has a plan for their lives, then it's our job just to hand them off to folks like y'all. You know what I mean? And move them, helping them grow that. But it's the thing with Young Life that we thought it was enough, just like Shaylen said about the Black Church. We thought it was enough just to introduce them to Jesus, but we realized it takes more. It takes a lot more discipling. They need an education. Love Jesus, but you need a high school diploma and a college degree. Love Jesus, but you need to wait till you get married to have a baby. Love Jesus, don't get a felony record. All of those things. That's our hope.
See, so what I'm trying to do is plant in the seed. You guys are so eloquent and articulate. Is to get a vision that what we're envisioning for our Black students is more than what technically the organizations were dreaming about for their students.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is more. It's hopeful for more, and I'm excited. I mean, I'm listening to Shaylen, and she just said the Impact Movement mission statement. The Impact Movement seeks to disciple Black students to become disciples of Jesus Christ in every aspect of their life. That's what we're talking about. And so this whole phenomenon that both of you are talking about is the reason why I wanted you to see that our dream, and I'm curious, have you already begun to dream what does COVID-19 looks like now after this is done for your communities? What are the things that you think you're beginning to have imagination about for your Black students now after COVID-19? And since we've been going back and forth, I don't have many people. I can go back to Shaylen now. What are some of your thoughts now coming out of COVID-19 that you're reimagining ministry?
Well, I mean, I think that there's some ways in which, like, there's definitely challenges that's been brought up by COVID-19. I think there's some ways that, like, it does open up our imagination. Like, there's a whole stream of the population that our ministries just aren't reaching, and that they are on college campuses and they are disconnected. And so we're asking the question for all the students who are in front of their laptops all day, who are on social media, probably even more than they used to be before. What is the opportunity that lays before us to engage them in ministry in some ways that could turn into something on campus later. So our hope is really that like we could do something in this moment that captures them, that will speak to what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. For this generation, community was already a sense. Loneliness was already something that they experienced. And for a pandemic to happen and to only exaggerate the loneliness that people are feeling, students are looking for answers. Students are looking for community. So in some ways, there's a temptation for us to be like, oh, it's a pandemic outside. Like we should just relax. And then when it's over, we'll be back at ministry. It's like, no, this is a moment. And there's something that the Lord could do in this space that actually could accelerate ministry in ways that we could never do if we never had to come online. And so we're praying, we're dreaming, we're asking the question, where are students? And also, who do our students know that would love to be involved with something like this if they actually knew it existed? And so we're asking those questions. We're trying new things. We don't even know if it's going to work. So we just trying a whole bunch of stuff now, and we'll see at the end of the day. But our hope is that one or two things that we try would actually lead to 10 new fellowships being planted. Students on campuses that we had never reached before, seeing a friend post a flyer about a Bible study and coming and saying like, what is this thing that you're involved with? Like, we want all of the students out there who need communities like this. And our hope is that the opportunity that this space creates would just be the first step.
What about you? You want to say amen one more time? Tell us.
No, not at all. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, I'll be honest, we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, like with our staff, it's a work in progress. But some of the things that we, in the past, I told you we had to supply meals, and now realizing that we're not supplying those meals, how do we do it at the home? Do we deliver pizzas? Do we figure out still, not just because we're not presently meeting together, how do we do this? One of the eye-opening things that I just heard the other day was with the virtual clubs and all this kind of stuff is that a lot of the kids were not getting on because they didn't want kids to see where they live in the background. They found out about the virtual backgrounds, changed the world. I mean, like the leader said, they called and said, how do I download those virtual backgrounds? So now more kids are coming, but you don't see where they live, you see the virtual background. You know what I mean? And so even them being embarrassed by that or whatever the case may be is teaching us some of those things that we can use as tools as we minister to them around, okay, so you're embarrassed about how do you not do this in your lifestyle? How do you, again, going back to what I'm talking about, reiterating, not get children before you're married, getting an education, getting those jobs so you can provide a wholesome community so that your children don't have to be sitting in the seats that you're sitting in right now. And so we're having great conversations, doing lots of raffles, like in the sense of, hey, for middle school and high school kids, food's everything. The first person that can get so many kids on that signs on, and I don't understand the terminology, so I may be saying it wrong, but like we send Grubhub food to them. We do raffles and we do Bible questions and the answers. We send Grubhub or the other food delivery places, send them lunch throughout the week on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, or different things like that. And we found out, one of my leaders said that we're doing a Bible study, which we call campaigners, that a couple of parents, they hear in the background saying, amen, does she mind if I listen in? I like what she's saying. You know what I mean? And so then parents sitting next to kids that would have never came out to any of our ministry at a location, but because they're curious of who they're talking to on the computer and through FaceTime or all that stuff, they were getting to listen in. And so we found out some of this, we're reaching parents more than we've ever reached them before, when parents were just letting, hey, go get in that Young Life van and leave and come back. And we had no connection at all.
I got one last question. Then I like to read a scripture, but I want to say a couple of things because we're almost over. We're going to post some resources that Bebe gave us on our feeds. So you should be able to see that. It's a bingo game and some of the things that they're doing in their virtual spaces. Some people could watch this, guys, and they could say, all right, now we got InterVarsity, we got the Impact Movement, we got Young Life here. Here we go. They're showing it now. But here's a question I got to ask you guys. Do you sense that we're competitors, or we're just different teams trying to reach the same thing in the same world? Because I want them to see how much vast respect I have organization. I have vast respect there's plenty of people. I work primarily with Jermaine Chapman and crew, and in their campus ministry, but I also work with Milt Massey and then other aspects of crew. But I have it with the Allender Center. How do you sense us, since we're talking about working Black students organizationally? Do you sense that we're competitors against each other, or do you sense there's a sense of collaboration for us?
I'll say this really quick. It's totally opposite. When I say this, I'm not speaking for Young Life as a whole, because I can tell you our Young Life suburban model doesn't need anybody else. I mean, it's a model that's been working since 1941. Their parents, they got the support system, they got everything they need. For us in the ministry that we work in, we cannot afford to have each other. Our collaboration is so important with the church, like-minded organizations, because our kids have such great needs. And so we can't provide all the needs, so we have to collaborate with, we collaborate with YMCA boys. Now, it has to be like-minded organizations. We don't collaborate with everybody, but like-minded organizations who have the kids' goals like we do in mind, of introducing them to Christ, helping them grow in their faith, and all those things. We have to collaborate. It's not an option if we're going to be anything. So, yep.
All right. What about you?
Yeah, I think what I would say is, I mentioned earlier how I was at this National Student Conference, and it was there I found out that my experience in college was actually pretty unique, and that most students don't have the opportunity to have a contextualized ministry space where they are. And it completely broke my heart. And I was like, what can I do? Or like, how can I be involved in making this less of a gap for Black students? And as I've worked my 13 years and I joined in the race of all the people in InterVarsity who've come before me, we haven't even scratched the surface of all the spaces that need Black communities. And so the way that I see impact, the way that I see Young Life or people who are doing campus ministry, we need us and more. And that's why, Jimmy, I heard you talking about church communities. Like, we are dreaming about how can we actually equip churches to plant and partner, because as long as our ministries have been here, as much as we've been praying, dreaming, and planting, there's so much open field. There's no need for competition, and we have to collaborate in order to see more students reached.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way about both you guys. I don't even care. Let's say Young Life, Ivy, and impacts on a campus. It wouldn't bother me at all if Ivy had 150, Young Life had 100, and we had 30. Because what that means is more Black students are being reached for the kingdom of God, and that we can penetrate, infiltrate, and change both our communities and the broader society because of our work. We all know each other. And it's vast importance for us. I like to read this one passage of scripture if they pull it up, and then I got one last closing comment to go. And this means a lot. Let me put my glasses on, because I know I'll be squinting, and people are going to say, "Why do you have your glasses on?" But I want to read this. Then the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said to me, "Behold, I put my words in your mouth. See, I've set you this day over nations, ethnic groups, and over kingdoms, governments, to pluck up, to break down, to destroy, and to overthrow." And I love this last part, to build and to plant. And what people fail to realize, for us, we're trying to pluck up and break down, but at the same time, we're trying to build and to plant. We're about doing something creative for the kingdom of God, and something new that can reach our communities. What I didn't tell everyone in the front end, but I'll tell you on the back end, my career in campus ministry started in Black campus ministry, where Shaylen works. And I was actually hired by the first Black campus ministry director, a guy named Elward Ellis. And tomorrow is the 6th anniversary when he went home to be with the Lord. And my time in InterVarsity allowed me to meet people in Young Life. That's how I met Dennis Pete and Elle Baker, who introduced me to Bebe Hobson. And then it allowed me to meet people in Impact, where I am right now. I have a vast amount of respect for all of us in all of these spaces, including those that I have not named, like Reform University Fellowship, Campus Outreach, Coalition for Christian Outreach. I want to see us reach Black students and reach in the ways that we're talking about now. And I want to thank both of you for spending a Monday evening with us. I really appreciate you guys. And I thank our audience for being with us as well. You guys are doing great work. I'm praying God's shalom and blessings and safety, both in your homes. Okay.
God bless you.
From you guys? Nothing?
It was a joy. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Great to get that technology. Shaylen?
Same. It's a joy to talk about Black students, how to reach them, things that they care about. So thank you for the invitation.
Oh, gifted people. So thank you very much. And good night to our audience. Next week is our last one for a while. It's going to be the last one in May, where we're going to have a group of college students to come on with us and to talk about their experience with graduation and other parts. So please join us next Monday. Thank you.